Welcome back to a new episode of The Big Three, our monthly podcast where we break down the biggest stories shaping influencer marketing and the creator economy. I'm your host, Ceci Carloni, and as always, I'm here with my co-host, Ahene, founder of Net Influencer. Welcome to the pod. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty well. Deep in World Cup madness. It's been crazy.
Absolutely. Well, I'm very excited for today's episode. We have three great stories lined up for today. So if you're ready, let's jump into story number one.
Let's do it.
The first one is about big money coming into our industry. Last month, creative artist agency and integrated media company launched Compound Creative Holdings. It's a 250 million holding company, and the idea is to buy, operate, and grow creator-led media businesses. One thing to know is that Compound will work separately from CAA's talent business, which represents over 300 creators. So this is not about representing creators. It's about owning their businesses. And CAA was very clear about why. They said creators are no longer just talent. They're building real media companies, which by now we already know. But my question to you, Ni, is what do you make of this new company, the way that it will operate and how they're thinking about creators?
Yeah. And I think from a thesis perspective, this absolutely makes sense. I mean, it's obvious that creators and the folks that are creating content for your Instagrams, your TikToks, your YouTubes, your podcasts, they're commanding more attention than ever. Right? We saw what happened with Backrooms and kind of Hollywood and kind of that community and what happened there. And so it's clear that the attention and the control and the influence is with the creators. My question though is, we've covered this space for 6+ years. There aren't that many large scaled creator businesses, right? And so, I can think about, a handful of them. Obviously there's Mr. Beast, there's Emma Chamberlain, there's Hailey Bieber, if you count that. But as you go down the list, Mark Rober has Crunchworks, Crunchbase. I forgot the name of
Crunchbase.
Crunch Labs. But as you go down the list, the size of those businesses starts to go down significantly. So what I'll be curious on is Compound going to be like a private equity company coming in to invest in existing businesses and underwriting cash flows? Or is Compound going to be more like a growth equity company where they come in to a smaller business and they hope to start to monetize both on the media side and the product side in terms of media distribution to other platforms like Tubi and other AVOD platforms, and on the product side, helping them build the relationships with the moose toy company or whoever. That's what I'm very curious on, kind of how they step into to really make these businesses larger and more sophisticated. Because I don't think I would be surprised if there's enough businesses to underwrite at that scale unless they're really paying very high premium valuation for just the top of the charts. So we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. What would your first guess be, Me? You said you're curious about how everything will play. What is your guess?
I mean, if it was me, the space that I'm interested in is the auto space. Doug DeMuro has a business called Cards and Bids. He's developed that with a PE, with a venture capital business. I think they do north of 8 figures in revenues. It's an auction-based kind of bid site. It's a perfect example of a YouTuber that's kind of gone down in his niche and created a platform. It'd be interesting if they invest in businesses like that, or if they're looking to do more media-based businesses. And so, again, I'm excited to kind of see more releases from them to see kind of the direction they go, because it's unclear for me if they're going to focus on more media businesses or the businesses that the creators start because of their clout and their audiences. So,
yeah. Okay. Up next, story number 2. This next story is about Ruggable, the washable rag brand, and how they turn creator marketing into their best performing revenue channel, all through ShopMy. The story comes from a panel at the Lead Summit. On stage were Ruggable CMO Lauren Sherman, an SVP from ShopMy, and Dan Pelosi, a food creator. So the story is that Ruggable used to manage creators by hand with spreadsheets and DMs. And then Sherman came in, and a few weeks into the job, she put around $500,000 into creators through ShopMy, which is a platform that connects brands with creators and shows which ones are driving sales. The result, around $3 million in revenue in the first month, and then it kept growing from there. Pelosi, the food creator, was part of the program, and he kept showing up in Ruggable's data. So Sherman sent him a message, and the partnership became a real collection, Ruggable by Dan Pelosi, with him leading the creative. Sherman summed up her approach like this. She said that she doesn't go into a collaboration hoping it will work. She goes in knowing it will because the data tells her. So my question to you, Nee, is what's your read on the way Ruggable is running the program?
And this is the way you run performance marketing just in general with social, right? Where you don't necessarily know what creator or what creative is going to do well. But if you have a way and a system to have 500, 600, 1,000 different iterations or 1,000 different creators that are creating content, you're going to find the outliers that say, okay, this person, for whatever reason, maybe it's their audience, maybe it's how they talk about the product, maybe it's kind of their engagement, maybe it's just a great combination between the product and the individual. This person is going to do well. And so based on the signal, the early organic reach, we're going to invest more dollars here. And so the fact that ShopMy was able, or that Ruggable was able to partner with ShopMy to kind of provide that number of creators gave them the opportunity to see who's going to be successful for our product engagements and integrations or not. And so we just posted this week about kind of the role of AI when it comes to kind of creator marketing. And I think that this is really what the next frontier is, right? Where, in the past, to be able to work with 100 creators, it took a lot of work. But as those barriers to entries to working with a lot of high quality creators start to reduce, we're going to see more and more brands work with a lot of creators to kind of establish like a baseline in terms of what the engagement rate is, and then trickle down on the creators where they see tremendous value. And so I think this is a motion that we're going to continue to see. It's great to see this is happening on the ShopMy platform. We're also seeing it on OTK, but we're also going to see it outside of these platforms across the next couple of quarters. So it's the same strategy that you need to be able to succeed on TikTok Shop as well. You need 100 plus creators that you're working with, and then you find the ones that are doing the best. And then with those creators, those are the ones you build deeper relationships with, and you try to find the next kind of cohort of brand ambassadors. And so, yeah, this is creator marketing 101 in 2026.
You just covered my next question, which was, do you think there's a broader story here about how brands are working with creators? Anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the part of this story that I'd love to kind of dive deeper in is to understand kind of the mix between, the traditional UGC type creators versus kind of influencers that actually have an audience, right? Because obviously when you work with UGC creators, the cost of the content is low and you have a lot of different variations in shots on goal. When you work with an influencer, you're paying a lot more for that content, but there's some built-in authority there. And so understanding kind of what that mix is, how many of those dollars went to smaller creators or UGC creators versus how many went to people with their own audiences, and how does that vary per category or per product? That's a super interesting analysis. And I would love, maybe it's something that we work on in terms of doing a deep dive on how campaigns are structured. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Lee, on to story number 3, last story of the day. We talked so far about the investors, the brands. Let's close with the creators themselves. And this next story is about Forbes, which just published its top creator list for 2026. In the article, Forbes opens by saying the creator economy is no longer trying to break into show business. It is show business. So a couple of things from the article before we talk about the list itself. First, the Hollywood side. You mentioned this before, Nee. The article talks about creator films now beating Hollywood at the box office. Backrooms had a 10 million budget and brought in more than $260 million. Obsession cost just $750,000 and has passed $290 million. Both films made by creators. Then there's also the streaming side that's mentioned in the article. Mark, Robert, Mrs. Rachel bringing their shows to Netflix. Mr. Beast has Beast Games on Amazon Prime. And Darman has an always-on channel with Samsung TV and just recently partnered with Fox to produce 40 vertical dramas. So now the list itself, for the first time in 5 years of this ranking, the top 50 creators together earn more than $1 billion. 1.02 billion to be precise. It's up 20% from last year. Not surprised at the top, Mr. Beast is number one with $300 million. Darman is second with 65 million, and Stephen Bartlett is third with $52 million. Do you agree with the list? Any misses? Anything that surprised you?
I mean, lists like these are always going to be subjective, and so it's hard for me to say. I mean, number one, Mr. Beast at the top is not surprising, right? When you think about a creator, you're going to think about Mr. Beast, whether you're in the creator economy or not. But when it comes to kind of the ranking from there, and this is not any shade, I don't think Cody Sanchez should have been as high as she is. I know she talks about business, she's pretty visible, but I don't see the dramatic impact of somebody like her. Who I would rather see on that list is somebody like Mel Robbins, who's constantly on the podcast list and top list. And so it was interesting to see that there was a distinction made on this list to not really include podcast forward individuals. The fact that Joe Rogan wasn't on the list at all was pretty surprising to me as well. And then, in general, like when it comes to coaches kind of straddle interesting worlds, right? Because in one hand, they're coaches and the coaching businesses have been around for a long time, but the new generation of coaches, they absolutely are using social media to put their names out there. And so, I think that this list did a pretty good job. I mean, there were even folks that, we've interviewed in the past, like Stephen He and a couple other folks that were on the list. MKDHD was pretty low on the list, but he was in the top 50. And so I'm excited to see mainstream publications like Forbes trying to understand the breadth and depth of the creator economy. But, I think it really depends on your lens and your angle. Obviously, it was a very America, U.S. focused list. If you think about global creators or creators in other countries that have a tremendous amount of media and mindshare that aren't even here. So, yeah, I think it was a good roundup by Forbes. Mel Robbins to me seems like a big miss. Maybe they consider her a podcaster and author than a creator, but I mean, I see her content all the time. And then, obviously Joe Rogan completely transformed kind of the podcast landscape for him to not be on the list. You can even add like a Joe Budden not on the list. There's a lot of media personalities that kind of been around for a long time that have definitely made their mark in the creator economy, but so maybe they don't consider podcasters part of that umbrella.
Yeah. A quick follow-up. Do you think, what's the broader story you think the list tells? When you look at the list, do you think there is a broader story about the industry? I
mean, I think the story that I would tell about the industry is the fact that nobody really has the authoritative way to rank the list, right? iShowSpeed, I think, was in the teens, if you, in terms of his ranking. If you ask anybody under the age of 25 who their number one creator is, he's probably on the list, right? He's getting a ton of during the World Cup. And so it just shows you how kind of interest-based the social graphs are, and depending on your lens and where you kind of sit, that really impacts, what you see and, how you characterize who was a influential creator or not. So yeah, it's all subjective.
Absolutely. Well, Nate, that was the last story of today's episode. Anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, with the World Cup, it's been interesting to see the World Cup being a global event where it might be one of the last global events where the narrative is completely told by broadcast and not by creative. Okay. And it will be interesting to see between now and 2026 and the next World Cup in 2030, how that shifts, right? Because here, at least in the United States, it feels like this is a broadcast event, must-see TV, and creators aren't even a huge part of the activations or the coverage. I know there's rumblings around kind of the commentators on the U.S. Fox on not necessarily the in-game commentators, but the studio commentators. And so it'll be interesting to see how that evolves over the next 4 years as people kind of age up and creators become more everyday dialogue. So that's something that we'll be watching across the Olympics in 2028 here in the United States, and then the next World Cup across the Spanish-speaking countries in 2030.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Lee, again, that's a wrap up for this month, Big 3. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. We'll be back next month with a new episode to unpack more stories and insights. Have a good one.
Awesome.